So before we bring out the panelists, we're going to take a look at all the nominated films, and they include Conclave, September 5th, The Brutalist, J.C. Eisenberg's A Real Pain, Sing Sing, and Nickel Boys. Please, let's take a look at the films. Please give a warm welcome to all Academy Award nominated writers. Peter Strong for Conclave. Tim Fehlbaum, September 5th. Mona Fastvold, The Brutalist. Jesse Eisenberg, A Real Pain. Clint Bentley, Sing Sing. And Jocelyn Barnes, Nickel Boys. And you're in wonderful hands with Ann Thompson, who will be moderating, editor-at-large at IndieWire.
Hello, everybody. My favorite panel, the smartest people in the room, the best movies of the year, all Oscar nominated. And I'm just going to give you a little bit, congratulations to all. I'm going to give you a little bit of background. We've got Conclave, nominated for 8 Oscars, which is written by Peter Strong. Globe winner, Critics' Choice winner, based on the Robert Harris 2016 novel. He just won the Critics' Choice last night, so congrats.
Thank you.
We have Nickel Boys. This woman here is Jocelyn Barnes, who rejoined her Hale County this evening, director Ramel Ross, adapting Colson Whitehead's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel. And it has earned 2 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture and Adapted Screenplay. And the movie devised a new way to portray point of view on screen, and we'll get into that. Sing Sing, Clint Bentley. This guy, I have my own order, nominated for Best Actor Coleman Domingo and Adapted Screenplay with his partner, Greg Quaidar, who directed the movie based on their narrative of the real-life rehabilitation through the arts program at Sing Sing Maximum Security Prison. These 3 are the adapted screenplays. Now we have original screenplays. The woman on the panel, Mona Fastvold, is married to Brady Corbet, and they work together on all their films. So they created this one together, the portrait of Hungarian Holocaust survivor and architect, played by Adrian Brody, Oscar nominee, who struggles to achieve the American dream. And then we have, for A Real Pain, Jesse Eisenberg. You all know Jesse. He wrote, he directed, and stars in this original film about 2 cousins. He plays one, and Oscar nominee Karen Culkin, who won last night at the Critics' Choice Awards, plays the other one. They travel to Poland to visit their ancestral homeland. And September 5th, down at the end, near the end, Swiss director Tim Fehlbaum wrote this with his old film school buddy, Moritz Binder. And it's about the 1972 Munich Olympics, told from the point of view of a newsroom. And we'll get into that, too. So, congratulations to all. Thank you for being here. So we're going to go down. This is, again, I have my own weird order. We're going to go down the line. It's alphabetical order by last name, in case you want to try to figure it out. That means we're starting with Jocelyn Barnes. And it's just a short resume of how you became a screenwriter.
It's pretty short. My day job is as a producer. So in this case, with Nickel Boys, the book rights to Colson's novel were held by Plan B and anonymous content, and they called me. They had seen Hale County this evening, and Dee Dee Gardner at Plan B thought that Ramel would make a very interesting director for Nickel Boys. And so they called me to find Ramel, and we ended up doing the meeting together, and they invited us to consider doing the film as a director-producer team. And then Ramel invited me to co-write, which ultimately they accepted as an idea. And so that's how I came to co-adapt this novel for the screen.
You've written some other things too.
I've written some other things, and recently, yeah. So this was really my first one out of the gate in a way that was so substantial. I did do a film years ago called Batu, which is based on a novel by Aminata Sofal, who's a Senegalese author, and it's about a group of beggars who go on strike and stop accepting alms. And it creates a crisis of conscience in Senegal. And that was done with Sheikh Omar Sissoko, who's a director from Mali, with the blessing of Aminata. So that was my first foray into screenwriting, and I really enjoyed it. But I haven't really circled back to it until now.
Okay. What about Clint?
I started as a fiction writer and did journalism for a while. And right outside of when I got out of college, I was trying to figure out how to make films and making documentaries and living in Austin, and where I met Greg Kuidar, who is my writing partner now. And we just started, really, he had this idea for this film that he wanted to make called Transpecos. And it was really just through trying to figure out how to write a screenplay for that to get it made. And we wrote like, I don't know, 9 page one rewrites on this thing, just like kept writing over and over again and trying to get it a little better each time. So yeah, that's how I got my start.
Jesse?
Yeah, it was when I was like a teenager, I'd be like writing like little jokes, and then when I was 16, I wrote my first script, which was about Woody Allen, contemporary, him changing his name to Woody Allen, and the script got like sent to people, and ultimately he threatened to sue me, and I assume it won't be the only time I'll be sued for writing something, but to this day it is. And then when I was like 18, 19, 20, I was writing like bad, like not bad, but like just very like formulaic screenplays that I thought could get made, and I had like one like option, and then I realized these will never ever happen, these like kind of commercial comedy attempts. And so I started writing plays. So for like the last, I don't know, like 15 years, I've been only writing like plays. And then my last play wasn't received that well, so I decided to write movies. My first movie wasn't received that well, so I decided to write another movie. And that's what brings me here today, Em.
This one turned out okay.
What's that?
This one turned out okay.
Yeah, I know, but the next one probably is going to be peak and valley.
Mona.
Do I always have to follow him?
I have 5 more jokes.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'm from Norway. I'm not funny. No, well, so my mother is a novelist, and she always encouraged me and my sisters to write. So I've always written every day, couple of pages, and no matter what, since I learned how to write. But it took me a long time to find my voice as a filmmaker and as a writer, because I grew up as a child actor, and for a while I thought I needed to never, be close to a camera ever again. but then I started writing my first film with my partner Brady, and from there on I just found an easy path to tell stories through films.
Tim.
Hi, I'm Tim. I also directed the movie September 5, so I'm more coming from directing, actually. Or I also worked as a DP a lot, and I wrote also my 2 previous movies, but they were not necessarily praised for their scripts. So was very glad. I never enjoyed the writing process too much. Before I was working with my, as you said, buddy from film school, and he's actually here. And he should be here with me on stage. So please quickly stand up. Moritz, who wrote the script with me.
Peter.
Hi, I'm Peter. I started out writing theatre in Newcastle, my hometown, or next to my hometown. And I sort of wrote black comedy plays, and I got an agent off the back of one of those. And they said, would you be interested in working in film? And I said, no, I just want to work in theatre. And then they explained to me what you get paid for working in film. And I changed my mind. And I haven't written a play since then, so... Yeah.
Are you regretting that?
No. You don't get paid very much for plays. No, but I would quite like to go back and do some theatre at some point. Yeah.
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 Yeah. And you also wrote Tinker Tailor, Soldier Spy. That's a big credit.
Yeah.
All right. So now we do know the order. So Jocelyn, you've been in the documentary space for a really long time. And of course, Hale County was your first collaboration with the Brown professor and photographer, Ramel Ross. How did you two first meet?
Ramel, yeah, I met Ramel at Sundance. Actually, it was almost an accident. I was just walking down a hallway, and a colleague from Sundance pulled me into a meeting and just said, "We're doing this kind of producer roundtable kind of thing where you do the speed dating with people who are pitching their projects, and we have this guy, and we don't know what to do with him. Would you sit and talk to him? We kind of think you would get along," and so. I did the meeting with Ramel, and he had been filming Hale County this evening, which is set in Alabama. And we started talking. He had about 8 minutes to show me, and I was in the middle of finishing the edit on a film called Strong Island. And I just said to him, I'm just so tied up in this film, which is so harrowing for the director. I really need to give time to the director, and so I'm just not available to produce. And he said, well, I'll just wait for you. And I said, okay, just keep doing what you're doing. And it became evident, like everyone else in the room had told him what he should do. And I just felt like he was doing something so extraordinary that no one should interfere with that. The first rule is do no harm as a producer, which is sometimes hard. That's how we first met. And then I produced that, and I was also involved in the edit process for that. So I kind of understood his take on cinematic grammar, which is very unusual. And if you've seen Nickel Boys, you know how unusual it is. And that's why I think he invited me to co-write with him, because I understood what it was he wanted to do. Yeah.
So talk about how you devised this extraordinary point of view structure for the movie. It is radical, to say the least, for those of us who've been trained shot, counter shot, master close up. That's not what you're doing.
Yeah, I think we approached, he came up with, when we read the book, we thought, okay, this book is so kind of perfect in its economy, and it will be a real challenge to do. We really have to figure out a different way to deal with cause and effect, and also a really different way to deal with the big twist inside of the film. And so he proposed to shoot it in what he calls with a sentient camera, which is sort of creating a way for the viewer, inviting the viewer into the point of view of the two main characters in the film. Not so much as to enter it's kind of treated as an extension of consciousness, the way that the camera moves. And the way that he and our cinematographer, Jomo Frey, came up with shooting was to try to align the audience's subjectivity with the subjectivity of the characters. And in thinking about that, we had to then also devise a way to write it. And so the other proposal alongside of this was to do no coverage, was to just shoot it in what we call oneers, which is just one take, basically. So we had to think about duration. And when we were doing the filming, we also had to think about how the production designer, for example, would work with the DOP and create options inside of what would be in the frame. So these kind of things, as you're writing, you're not just, usually when you're writing a screenplay, you're sort of describing what the viewer will see. inside of the script. But in this case, we had to also think about how the viewer would see, and so recognizing became more important for us than knowing. It's kind of like when you understand a film that's moving both forward and backwards, and you come to understand that you're inside of a memory for the most part. The idea of recognizing becomes more important. The way, when you read a poem and something sparks across cultures and times, you can find something inside of a poem that resonates with something in your own memory or your own experience. And that was the idea.
It winds up being very beautiful and very immersive, but you're also dealing with brutally violent subject matter. We're talking about a school for boys, a reform school, where these Black kids are abused. So, how did you handle that violence?
One of the first things we decided when we were offered the book, and we were offered the book by Plan B, who had done 12 Years a Slave and also Underground Railroad. And one of the first things we said was we don't want to have any on-screen violence because we do not want to unintentionally reinscribe the imaging of Black people and the bodily abuses that this larger community has been so closely identified with, that it's become almost the only way of imaging Black people across the news and historically. And so Ramel really wanted to find a different way of dealing with Black visuality and this aspect of violence. We thought we could respect the experience of people who survived the Dozier School for Boys, which is what Nickel Boys is loosely based on, by allowing the audience to, like, relying on the audience's own imaginative capacity, that you could really fill in the blanks with your own imagination, and it could probably actually be in some ways more visceral for you as the whole film is an invitation to participate, really.
Thank you. All right. So you and Greg became writing partners. How did you fall in love? What happened?
In terms of starting to write together, yeah, it was just we had very real shared interests, and at that time when we were kind of both becoming filmmakers before we knew each other, it was around the U.S.-Mexico border conflict, and just really trying to find ways to explore that and try and make some sense of it. Living in Florida, where I grew up, and Texas for Greg. And having people in our lives who are really affected by that conflict. And so it really just started from that of having shared interests, and then also both of us being documentary filmmakers, but also really wanting to make narrative films. And there was something we would always find, and we would always talk about, that when we were doing a documentary and you are getting ready to interview somebody, there's a lot of times where you're sitting around having lunch, or when they're getting mic'd up and they're telling you all these crazy stories and showing you pictures on their phone and all this stuff. And then they sit down for the interview and they become somebody else. There's a camera in front of them, and then they don't tell you those stories that they're telling you otherwise. And we just, in starting with that film Trans Pecos, and then really carrying that to here as well, we felt that in some ways we could maybe get closer to the truth of things by using a narrative film versus doing a straight documentary in some of the things that we were exploring specifically.
So I'm fascinated by how you and he worked with the inmates at Sing Sing who are in this program, and how they became part of the script writing process.
Yeah, it was we spent, it was about 6 years from the time that Greg first found the article about rehabilitation through the arts, this program at Sing Sing in New York State. It's in a lot of facilities now. But it was really a long process of just trial and error. And so we went in and we got to know the guys, and we became volunteer teachers and led an acting workshop inside a maximum security prison up in New York State called Greenhaven. And we would always go, we would just have the most profound experiences and learn a lot about what these men and women were doing in their different facilities. And then we'd go away and write, and we'd come up with a script, and then we'd show it to people. and it would always fall short of whatever magic that we were experiencing and that they were doing. And it was really kind of along the way in that 6 years, we then went off and made Jockey, and that
It's a really
script.
good movie. I recommend it.
Thank you. But that script really taught us how to let life into a script. We rewrote 50% of that script while we were shooting on this live racetrack, just based on whatever would come to us and whoever we'd meet or whatever location we'd find. And really, like, the ending was written while we were shooting. And so then coming back to this, we said, you know, we should open up our process more and bring Divine I and bring Divine G into it. And then we met Coleman, and Coleman's such a brilliant storyteller as well. Coleman Domingo stars in the film. And really, we just, like, by letting go of any like control as a writer, it actually, like, we could get closer to the truth of what we were trying to get across. And so we came up with this process on writing Sing Sing, where we would write a few scenes, like 5 scenes, and then we'd get Coleman and Clarence together on Zoom, and we would just let them read it cold, and they would read the scene cold, and then they'd give us feedback, and we'd see what was working, what wasn't, and then we'd write a few more scenes. And it was really like building it as we were going along. It was a really beautiful process, really fun.
Talk about that amazing last scene, where that came from. You know, Coleman Domingo is leaving the prison. I'm going to spoil it for
Spoiler
all
alert,
of you who
yeah.
haven't seen the movie, but you have had time. You have had time to see this.
This is on you now.
He leaves after 25 years, and he's met by someone.
Yeah. There's so much to, like, there's so much to unpack with that, because that was based on what John Whitfield, Divine G, went through. He was in prison for a crime he didn't commit, and spent a long time there, and was denied clemency each time he went up for it. And then when you go through a clemency hearing, if you're denied, you have to spend 7 more years there. And that's what he went through. And there was something, there was something that he talked about of just having to accept that he was there. And that's something that we wanted to show in the end of the film, that it wasn't about this as much like this triumphant moment on stage. It was about what they were doing in the day-to-day in that program with each other, and where they were finding healing in the space that they were. And then I don't know. It was funny because, like, it's a bit the ending that you're talking about, almost like maybe if you were writing this, maybe if you were following a screenwriting book, you would not put that ending on there. It almost feels like a coda to the film rather than an ending, and yet it felt so important to kind of follow that character's trajectory. And then he comes out, and Divine I is standing there and just grabs him in a big hug, and it was something that Greg and Pat Scola, the amazing cinematographer, it's just in one take, and it's one shot, and it's so beautiful, it's so raw. There's something, like, very visceral that comes out of Coleman.
You're getting me going.
Yeah. And then the ending in the car, the last bit of where he's just, like, in a car and just rolls down the window. We had these longer conversations where they're, like, on a train or in a diner and talking about what are we going to do next and all of these things. And then we got to it, and we were like, there's no words that can encapsulate what this character is going through. We just need to throw all the writing out. It's funny, I'm sure all of us feel this way, where you do some amazing writing and you're so proud of it, and then the actors find a much better way to do it without saying anything at all, and you're like, well, there goes that. So, yeah, just him opening the window was enough.
So Jesse. So tell us a little bit about how much of this you knew about in terms of your family in Poland and what they went through, and then what you learned when you did research, how it changed your knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, in 2008, my wife and I went to Poland, and we went to, like, see the little house that my family lived in up until the war. We actually filmed the movie, like, outside that house, and actually there's a shot inside that house, from inside that house too. And I was always kind of curious about my family's history. My parents and, like, their generation never talked about it, because they, grew up with parents who were suffering survivor's guilt, and and so like my parents never talked about it, so it was like my kind of ignorant third generation icy coldness that allowed for me to start exploring this tragic history, because I didn't have the same kind of fraught repression, and so I was always interested in it. Writing this movie though, I mean, maybe it sounds awful to say this, but my fealty was always to fiction, was always to the story. And so there are parts that come in and out that are kind of autobiographical, but that was always like the lowest priority. My highest priority has always been writing a story, and oftentimes the truth not the truth, but some historical fact that's kind of interesting as we discuss history is interesting, but doesn't help the narrative. And that's not because I'm trying to like make a commercial narrative. It's not that at all. In fact, it's the opposite. I'm trying to make something that feels more real. And so a lot of the stories that come out in the movie are my family's stories, but they're like tweaked a little bit. The character of my grandmother, we call her Grandma Dory, is my Aunt Doris and my cousin Maria. My Aunt Doris is exactly who we describe as our Grandma Dory in this movie. This very kind of tough, she was like my mentor in my life, and she was like always tough, always like unimpressed with me, and I needed her, and she, slapped me because I was stoned, and like. I needed that like grounding, the way Kieran's character needs that grounding. But her story of survival is my cousin Maria's story, who I wrote a play about. And so my loyalty was always towards how can I convey like authenticity through a story rather than like, honor my family by mentioning that, we owned a bread store. You know what I mean? That was my goal.
So tell me where the cousin character comes from, and how much was he changed by the explosion of Kieran Culkin?
My third play was called The Spoils, and I wrote and performed this character named Benji, who's this kind of maladaptive guy who's charming, but really self-destructive. And what's the opposite of other destructive? Destructive, I guess. And so I had done this character for like 2 years, and this character is a little different, and the context is totally different, et cetera, et cetera. But like, I had been like thinking about this kind of person for a really long time. I'm fascinated by these people. I feel envious of these people who seem totally comfortable in their own skin, these people who seem charming, these people who show up late to every room, but for some reason the people in the room are like, hey, he's here, everything can start. And I've always been by contrast, I'm the person who goes in and sets up the chairs, and everybody's like, why the fuck are you here now? So like, I've always envied these people. But then when I like go home and go home to like stability that I've created to like deal with my own anxieties. I have a wife and a kid, and like I have some stability in my life. I always kind of like feel a little bad for those people. Like, what happens when they go home, or what happens when the party ends and the lights turn off and the music stops, and it makes me kind of feel better about my own life choices. So I think about that all the time, and I'm fascinated by those people, and I've tried to do iterations of those people and different things I've written. The difference when you ask how is it changed by Kieran, the difference is like, because I was originally going to play that part, and if I did the part, it would have been like led with more rage, like my rage, because when I did this play, my rage was really on the surface, and the charming thing was like secondary. And so the first few days when Kieran was doing the part, it didn't ring correctly to my ear, but I could sense it was natural for him, and so I didn't want to meddle in it. And then by like the fourth day, I realized this is better, because what he does so brilliantly is kind of makes the audience love him before they don't, and then by the end love him again. And it's just, that was his instinct. We never discussed it. It was his instinct, and it was a really beautiful instinct. And I think it does wonders for the movie to kind of make it more warm and accessible and inviting before it transgresses.
Mona.
Yes.
I'm really curious where the beginning, the very first nugget of The Brutalist. I know it was a long time ago. It may be so long ago that you can't remember it, but where did it come from?
It's a combination of a few things. We both have architects in our families, my grandfather and Brady's uncle. But beyond that, we wanted to explore a story between an investor and an artist. So, we're filmmakers. So,
how much is it based on you two? It feels like it sort of is.
there's a lot in this story that's personal. I feel it's you know, even though they're varying, you know, it's a very different story from our story, but still, I think this is the closest we will ever come to making a film about making movies. And I think also, you know, exploring the relationship between Laszlo and Erzsébet and that marriage was also something that we were excited to portray in a different way than I think it has been in these types of films and these types of period pieces.
So you two switch roles on your films. You're a writer and you were both child actors, and then you became a writer and a director, and you switch off and you help each other. Explain how that works.
It's quite symbiotic, but we started working together before we were a romantic couple. So we were writing together first, and then we fell in love. So we kind of had established this way of working together before we're a couple, which I think helps. But no, it's, you know, it's, life is so messy, you know. For in these jobs, it's sort of like a wild chaos that you try to have a family, try to have friends, try to have a life while making movies is difficult. So I think for us it's easier somehow to just mix it all up and try to support each other as much as we can through the making of these very challenging films that, you know, are very hard to finance, that, you know, most people don't want to see get made. You know, we co-write, and then it's always very clear who is going to direct the picture. And then when we direct second unit for one another, we very much adapt to each other's style.
I want to follow up though. I want to ask if the long delay in getting this movie made was beneficial in the end. How did it help the movie?
Well, the good thing about it was the cast and the crew that we ended up with. I'm very, you know, we had some wonderful people attached to these parts, and we had some great crew members that also, you know, dropped out. Life happens, but in the end, I can't imagine the film any other way. So it feels special and beautiful that we ended up with this particular group of people.
And can you explain how you ended up with such a long movie and came up with the idea of the 15-minute intermission? How did that come about?
Well, the story was just a big story. It always felt like a long story. And I also felt very compelled not to hold back with this particular story. I said to Brady, I don't want to think as a producer when we're writing this. I just want to dream big and allow ourselves to just let the story take us in the direction we want it to take us. And then we both enjoyed the idea of the intermission, so we wrote it in the script. We had the little picture in the script with the wedding photo, and we thought that's nice. It's nice to get to leave and, you know, do whatever you need to do, and then come back or not, if you don't like it. But no, it's what the story wanted to be. And that's also why it was so hard to get it made, obviously, because we weren't willing to cut the thing into
bits. Yeah. Okay. So Tim, tell us about how you started looking at the 1972 Olympics and you didn't know quite what your focus was going to be. Explain how you found the point of view that you ended up taking.
Yes. First, I want to say I'm coming from Switzerland, and in Switzerland is one of the few countries where they still do with every movie the intermission. And it's something that because going to the cinema is, of course, a thing that you do together. And I really always enjoy it in that intermission. You talk about the movie and then you talk again about after the movie. So I really love this about the movie, that it has this intermission where it's just burned in and you start to talk about it. Having said that, yes, it's quite a funny story because we originally planned to tell the story from multiple angles. Like Moritz and myself, we were quite broadly researching in what happened on that day in Munich. And we were telling it actually from the police side, from the politician side, from the perpetrator side, victim side. We're quite far already also in writing a script about this. And while we were doing this, we were having, like, Moritz is coming from documentary field, and he's like doing intense research before he even starts to write. And one storyline that we had was always the media line, because we more and more learned what an important role the media played on that day. And then we were lucky enough to find an eyewitness, Jeffrey Mason, that's the character in the movie played by John Magaro. And he told us of it. It was supposed to be like a 20-minute Zoom call or so. And then 2.5 hours later, we hung up. And after listening to his stories and what he told us, what they experienced in that room as they made the switch as a group of sports broadcasters from reporting on the serene games, as the Germans call these games, to this crisis, listening to these stories seemed so interesting and so relevant also from today's point of view, that first, jokingly, actually, we said, like, after that call, hey, maybe we could tell the story entirely actually from that perspective. What happened parallelly is also that my previous movie, I'm sure you're not going to recommend this one as you just did before, but it didn't do too well, let's say it like this. So there was also like a little bit, I don't know if like doubts from also from distributor side or whatever, like if can we, that was quite a, it would have been quite a big budget movie, like a lot more it would have cost than this did. And there were doubts if we could do that, or let's say we also got the plug pulled on that bigger project. And first we were devastated, but then we said, like, Moritz, we had this, you know, remember after the Zoom call what we said, like, let's just try it. And then we said, like, give us 3 weeks, we'll come back to you. So the first thing we did, we opened the final draft, and I mean, you all know that, can imagine that must have been like what a interesting process that was. We just deleted out all other storylines. And then we read it again, we're like, it's actually pretty good. It's actually, and it was immediately, from a director's point of view, I immediately liked the challenge. How can I tell a story that actually takes place entirely in one place? Right? I also like films that play with that idea. There's almost something Hitchcockian about the idea of making it also about what you don't see than rather what you see, a film, right? Or taking tension from that. And also, as you all know, there's a healthy discussion going on who can tell a story about what. And there are certain other aspects of that day that are not less relevant than what we are telling, but that I also realized in the process that I wouldn't feel confident telling a story about, or where we would have, there's also still a lot of unclarities, and we would have need to speculate, and this is something that we didn't want to do. And today, I'm like, I'm so glad that we got the plug pulled and that previous approach, because I think that's the best thing that could have happened. And I just think it's an interesting story of how a typical story of how a limitation in budget can actually lead to a more interesting approach maybe. And for me, it's also a lesson in how, if you go deep into perspective, in a very specific perspective, then you can go really deep into that research.
So it was really interesting that this was the first time that you had a live broadcast like that, where the whole world was watching, and ABC News Sports figured that out. You also had a producer, Sean Penn, got involved. Did he give you good advice?
Oh, yes, very much. He actually said he was really involved from very beginning on, and he has also very creative producing partners, John Wildermuth and John Palmer, and they gave like great notes on the script. He said great notes about the character. Especially, you could see that he read it from an actor's point of view. And then I have to say also, like, when you're doing a European production and we wanted to approach actors at the level of a Peter Sarsgaard or a John Magaro, yeah, sometimes you don't get that fastly an answer, let's say. If you can write an email with a film produced by Sean Penn, you're suddenly surprised how fastly these answers come back.
Sort of how it works, yeah. No, congratulations. So Peter, you've been very patient, Peter. I'm curious about point of view in your script as well. How much did the focus on the Ralph Fiennes character and his crisis of belief, the cardinal, who's wrangling the election of the new pope. How did that focus emerge in your screenplay?
Well, in the book, there's a narrator, and it's sort of told as a past event. And I did think about doing that because obviously it's a wonderful. I mean, we were talking about this a little bit earlier. It's a wonderful technique because it can give significance to events. If you're saying, you know, it was on the 14th that everybody arrived, you automatically think something's happening. But in the end, I decided that I should sort of hold to Rafe's character's point of view, really, and let the audience proceed through the events with him. And it seemed like sort of one of the central themes was that certainty maybe was, well, as there's a line in the film, certainty is the enemy of unity, and that seemed very important, especially in the world we're in now. And so the character who is struggling with doubt about his faith, and in the end can embrace doubt and be uncertain and move forward anyway. That sort of felt like in a way like what the film was about politically as well.
What makes the film so entertaining? I mean, it really works with Rafe, you know, looking at it through him. It's like a chess game, you know, where the audience really gets caught up in who's winning and who's ahead and who's behind. And you really had some fun with that.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's all inherited from the book, you know, because the book had sort of two ambitions. There's twin ambitions, and we inherited both of them. Well, you know, we tried to inherit both of them. One was to be about something, and the other one was to be entertaining. And I quite like that twin ambition. But and in a way, the setting and you know the main plot really helps because I think if you say to an audience this is a comedy, then the audience kind of sit back and go, okay, well let's see if you can be funny. But if you say this is an ecclesiastical drama, you give them a tiny joke and they're like, oh Christ, thank God, you know, and then so they kind of relax and could enjoy it, yeah.
Was there always an explosion in the Sistine Chapel?
There was always one explosion. I added I added an extra explosion. That's Hollywood for you. I mean, one of the sort of jobs really was to balance the kind of the drama, the smaller and the personal drama against, you know, essentially a thriller. So it was always about seeing, are we doing the thriller? Are we doing too much thriller? You know, dial back on the thriller. So it felt like that all the way through. And then we sort of felt there was a point around about the middle where we thought, okay, there's no thriller here. Let's put in a car bomb. That always works.
And also Isabella Rossellini is a fascinating thing because there isn't that much dialogue for her, and yet she has a remarkable role in this story.
Yeah, I mean, it helps that it's Isabella Rossellini, to be honest. You know, she doesn't have to have a lot of lines and you notice it. I mean, again, this is inherited from the book to some extent, but we really wanted to lean into it that by showing the silent nuns, who, and they are a silent order who would serve the conclave, but by constantly returning to them as they carry out small tasks for the men, they became a kind of silent chorus, and that built a kind of question into the film, or a kind of tension. And I think one of the reasons why Isabella's speech in the canteen scene, why audiences sort of responded to that in the way they did, is because she just sort of wound up the silence until she goes off like a grenade, you know. I mean, it's a really good example of the importance of silence and not having lines in drama and the role that can play.
Thank you. This is the fun part where we're going to ask each of you to explore with us. Just tell us how you write. What's your process? And you can be as neurotic about it as you like. And instead of making Peter wait the whole time, I'm going to start with you, Peter.
Okay. I quite like waiting till the end because you got more time to think of something. So this is going to be a shit answer, isn't it? Do you mean literally sort of nuts and bolts? What do you?
Literally.
Okay. Well, I mean, I've tried it all in my time. I've written at night. I've written in the daytime. Now it's so settled into. I get up quite early and I do most of the writing in the morning. Yeah. I mean, if I haven't done it by lunchtime, it's not really going to happen that day. And the afternoons are more for editing. I work on final draft. I use a MacBook. I'm trying to think of anything of any interest. One little tip for people who want to do this. I try and leave, when I finish for the day, I try and make sure that the thing I'm going to pick up on the next day, I've already slightly started, or I know at least what I'm going to do. Because the hardest thing is to have finished and come back in the next morning and just have a blank space in front of you. You know, I can get locked into a block if that happens.
Tim?
Yeah, Final Draft, also MacBook. No, I must say there's nothing more than I hate than a blank page and that cursor blinking. So I was blessed that I had my film school buddy preventing me forever for being in that situation at all. So what we did, we did a lot of research always before. And then he started to write a scene that we talked about and included all of that research in that scene. So this is really nice. It's a really rich scene. You can see that he knows what he's talking about. The flip side to that coin is it's really long. So that's where I then started to shape it maybe a little bit. And that's where we were, I think, a good team together. And we then had also, as you can hear, I'm not a native speaker, so we had a third co-writer coming on board, Alex David, who helped us with the English dialogues. And we were lucky enough that we had this eyewitness, so we could also give him every other draft to read to see if the dialogues would be accurate and everything. Apart from that, listening to music is a big inspiration for me before writing, and I'm a movie geek. I love watching movies and then writing a little bit, and maybe watch a scene from that movie again, then write a little bit. So yeah.
Mona?
So I have a method that works for me. I like to write by hand in the morning for a while, just all kinds of nonsense. And that's sort of how I need to get started. And then Brady and I spend a lot of time before we sit down to write, talking about the story, telling everyone we meet about the story over dinner parties, just constantly exploring the story that way by talking about it and doing research and reading. And then when we sit down to write, we do 5 pages a day, minimum. And we try not to look too much back in the first draft, because somehow there's something really great about getting to the end of something and then start going back and revising. Also, Brady likes to move cameras around, and just it drives me crazy. I was like, I need to, like, what are we trying to say here? What is this about? So, so I try. It's my. I think maybe it's my rule, but he accepts it.
Jesse?
I have a huge 1980s supercomputer, and it's in a
program,
cooling
though?
room. What?
What program?
ENIAC? No. I don't write in Final Draft because I don't know what the things are going to be. I write plays, I write short stories and essays, humor essays, and so like A Real Pain started out as like an adaptation of a story I wrote for these two characters, but going to Mongolia, and that was not going. I was trying to adapt it because I thought it'd be great to shoot something in Mongolia, and that was not going well. And then I had lunch with Brady and Mona, who had just scouted in Poland, and I said, "God, my family's from there. That would be, God, I should shoot something there." And then I saw an ad on the internet like the following week, and it was while I was trying to write this Mongolia story, and it was for Auschwitz tours with lunch, and it was like these. And so I changed. So I took the characters out and I rewrote the story. I changed some of the things with the characters. I made them family, but I didn't know that it was even going to be a movie. I write in email drafts, so it can automatically save. But I didn't know if it's going to be a play or a movie. I thought it'd be cool to shoot in Poland, but I just don't want to feel like it's an official thing. So like, the scene you saw before we came out here, it was like just a monologue I had written, kind of unrelated to even the movie. It was like just how I feel about people. I love this guy. I hate this guy. How is it possible? How is it possible that our family survived by 1,000 miracles and yet he wants to die? And we have everything and we don't have any appreciation for it. These are just like diary entries of mine. And then I start to feel, if it feels like it could be a movie and like structured like that, then I'll start to put in like interior, exterior, but in the email draft. And then once the thing is done, I don't know if it's going to be 300 pages or 40 pages in a script form, but I've been like lucky. It's usually like within like 90 and 110 pages. So like I'll transfer it into the thing, and then I'll have to do like a Brady thing and like correct all the nothing's capitalized. And but if I wrote in final draft, I think I would feel too much like this is a movie, and now I have to
You
think
have a
of this.
deadline.
Yeah, deadline and Hollywood and Courier, and so like I just can't. So that's how I write, and I don't want to have. Yeah, I just don't want to feel like it's a movie until it feels like it's my personal exorcism first. Thank you. Correct.
Clint,
Yeah, I don't know.
you get to follow Jesse.
I'll just skip me. Yeah. I try. I think so much about writing is just trying to find your own little way to get past whatever's blocking you from writing. And for every writer, it's different. I try and write every single day, even if it's like Mona was saying, even if it's just like nonsense or a poem or a short story or something like that, just to like keep the muscle going. Because I think the times where you have this beautiful bolt of inspiration from the heavens is kind of few and far between for me, at least. And a lot of it's just like doing the work. It's nice when Greg and I are writing a script together. It's nice to have somebody else kind of waiting on pages, and then you have to get something done because this person's waiting on you so they can write their bit. We do a lot of outlining together to get on the same page about what the story is. And then we go off and we kind of take each script in sections. And this person will do these 5 scenes. This person will do these 5 scenes. Then we'll switch them back and forth, and just kind of like go through iterations as we're going forward and build the script that way. And try not to get too far ahead of the other person, so that whatever this person's discovering can help guide the story along. Yeah.
Well, the two of you do a version of what Mona and Brady do. Train Dreams is your most recent.
Yes. Yeah.
A bit of a hit at Sundance, picked up by Netflix. But this one you directed and he wrote.
Right. And yeah, like Mona and Brady, we're each distinct directors, and we each have our own tastes, and we each have our own things that we're into. And I think there are things that when we're writing a script that I'm going to direct, there are things that we'll do that wouldn't necessarily find its way into a script that Greg is going to direct, and vice versa. And that's kind of nice. There's something when you're writing and directing and then getting to the edit and I don't know, you get so caught up in your own head and your own thoughts and all of that. It's really nice and refreshing to step back and be in support of another artist. And Greg and I talked about it a lot. We each learn a lot from the other person too, of watching this, working on this project for this person who you love very dearly and want to see succeed, and then watching them go through it and finding ways to help support the person. And then also sometimes you watch them do something differently, and we've joked about this, where you watch them and you're like, well, I would do it differently. And sometimes you're right and sometimes you're very wrong. And it's nice to see, as directors, we don't often get to see other directors work. It's a very lonely job. And so it's nice to have that partnership.
Jocelyn, didn't you write something called Harvest?
Yeah, but that was after Nickel Boys. So it's been great to be a producer, because I've had the privilege of working doing over 60 films and working with different kinds of artists and learning from all of them, actually. So it's been, I think, when we approached this particular film, we approached it as an edit. It was so different from the book. And Ramel is a photographer and as well as a filmmaker. And I thought, well, okay, if we're going to construct this in visual movements and we're going to use images in a particular way that we know will have a lot more of the narrative will rely on visual movements rather than so much dialogue, that the way to do it would be to actually think about it as an edit first. And we were very, very precise. And there's a lot of archival footage inside of the film, and it's deployed in different ways. That we did a lot of research. The process of writing for me is very much about, I have notebooks and I draw as well as write. And so finding images from the actual investigation that happened at the Dozier School for Boys. The forensic anthropologist who did the exhumation of graves, there were things like marble or a penny that were found in the pockets of children that were buried in those graves. And those things really stayed with us. And we thought, okay, we have to find a way for these things to echo inside of the film to remind you that these were children. And also, what that says about us as a culture. And it became a way of both using archival as part of the investigation that one of the main characters undertakes inside of the film, as well as using archival in a completely non-illustrative way. I really hate archival that illustrates points that are already made. So it was interesting to find a way to deepen interiority, as well as hopefully for the viewer to expand the viewer's world by using archival in an unusual way, in a more associative way. And so that really required very specific choosing of images. We did a lot of research in the course of the writing, as well as deciding images that we thought we might like, and then asking our archival producers to go and find things that were similar and explore. And even the final montage inside of the film is about 70% as scripted. And so that precision was part of cracking the structure. And I was saying earlier that for us, the treatment was really the hardest part to crack. And then I think we started to then really write the scenes and deepen the characters and create more of the narrative aspects of it in a way that the audience can understand the way time moves inside of the film. So it was a very interesting, unique process, and we use images so much in that process. When we did Hale County, we mapped out the edit using images, not written cards. A lot of people like to do paper edits, and that ease of creating story that way comes from that practice of years and years of creating story in the edit room. So just seemed like the best way to approach it. Yeah.
So the next question is what was the most difficult scene to write? The one that just kept you awake at night and made you crazy?
For us, it was the ending. Where to end the film, because again, as I said, the film is really different from the book, and the ending of the book is quite different from where we ultimately ended the film. But I think we were really fortunate. We only ended up doing 3 drafts, which is very unusual. And the thing that took us 3 drafts was to figure out that ending. And Ramel it was funny. We shot this scene, and I won't tell you what the last image is, but we shot this little pickup at one point. And he said to me that was going to be the last shot. And it was such a Ramel signature. It was just so perfect, and kind of recuperated, I think, a sense of hope inside of a film that can be difficult, but the hope is in the love. And I feel like, in these times that we're living in right now, how important it is to actually insist on creating a society where hatred cannot take root. And for us, that's about love.
Clint?
It was also the ending, and I talked about it a bit before, of just like we wrote like 6 iterations of the ending and then just decided to throw out all the dialogue. But another one that I was thinking about just now that was very difficult was there's a scene where Clarence Macklin playing Divine Eye, sorry for all the spoiler alerts we're giving for Sing Sing today, but Coleman's character, Divine G, leaves the program and is kind of gone from the movie for a bit. And that was something that it was difficult. This came from a place of Coleman's time was like with us was very limited, and we only had 19 days to shoot the film. And at first we had Coleman for 4 weeks, and then he was in between finishing up The Color Purple and then going back to shoot pickups for Rustin. And so we had no time to be like, oh, we'll get a couple more days here or there. And then we lost him to some more, like there was a COVID thing or something, and he was in every scene of the movie, and then we lost some more days, and we didn't know what to do. And then we just looked at it as an opportunity and said, okay, well, we have this character leaving the program. And then in the original script, we like went with him as he's away from the program. And it was really difficult to figure out what we were going to do. And then we were just like, why don't we just let him go? Let your main character walk out of the film and stay with the program and stay with let the secondary character become the main character for a minute. And it became kind of this like breakthrough thing that was it was from solving a production problem, but it opened up something really interesting in the script that I don't know that we would have come up with otherwise.
Jesse?
Yeah, well, for like in the movie, like there's a scene in a concentration camp, and like the movie, if you've seen it, plays kind of like comedically for the first kind of like half, and then there's a scene at a concentration camp, and I was mortified to write it because it just seemed so exploitative. Like setting anything at a place like that feels like exploitation because you take your characters and you've seen them in other movies, and then you put them against the backdrop of like a crematorium, and it just feels like cheap melodrama, like no matter what you do. And so I was getting to the scene, but they had to go there because it's like a Holocaust story that culminates in this thing. And so they had to go there, and I was just, I think, like dreading getting up to that scene because I didn't know what I didn't know what I would do with it. And then, you have to write exterior concentration camp day. It just feels like you're trying to commodify this tragic history. And so I did that, and then I hate this kind of things in scripts. I hate when I read it, or I never write it, but I wrote like a note to the reader just because I was so embarrassed to have the scene in the movie. So I just wrote a note to the reader. There will be no music. The shots will be simple. The characters will walk in the building, and they will look at the thing and walk out of the building. And it felt like that was the only mature, reverential way to set a scene there. And when we finally got access to shoot there, I wrote another scene there because I felt so lucky to have access there, and I felt like, wait, maybe we have to do a scene here. And so I wrote a scene where like Kieran's character disappears from the group tour, and because he goes away to smoke pot because to cope with the pain he's feeling from the thing, and then he comes back to the group and his eyes are all red, and I know it's because he's stoned, but the group just think he's been crying, and so the group all hugs him. And I know he's stoned, and I'm furious, and I'm standing like 20 feet away just watching as this group of people descend onto this fucked up stoner. And so it's like so I had this scene there, and we're scouting, and I'm like, oh, I could shoot that here and do this here, and I just felt like, no, that feels wrong. Don't do a scene. And I'm so happy we didn't. It's so like, there are certain locations, maybe a concentration camp is the only one, maybe Sing Sing is another one, where it's just like you have to treat it with a certain amount of reverence or it becomes exploitation.
Mona?
It's hard to say. This script in particular, what was hard was to put it down. Once we started writing, we just couldn't stop. We kept working on it and working on it, and it was really obsessive for me while I was writing it. So I was never, on other scripts, I've had moments where I've been really stuck, where I'm like, I can't find the key into something. And with this particular story, I really saw the path for all of the characters. I think we kept on adding to and rewriting a lot the scene between Van Buren and Laszlo, and they talk about architecture and his history, and it was important to be very specific about his background and his history and what came before to me. And that was something I kind of kept returning to with all of the characters, about not saying too much, but still enough about the life that had happened before the war, with Erzsébet and the letters as well. So I think those were the places that I kept returning to. And I think, yeah, that. And also the first love scene between the two of them was something that I kept returning to as well, as like I had instinctually an idea of what that would be, but to try and articulate sort of someone wishing and wanting to hold someone they love, hold their trauma, and really kind of take it from their body and onto their own, even though they're weaker physically.
Tim?
Yeah, also the ending. I think I remember our script writing teacher at film school saying like, every writer has good beginnings in the drawer. It's like the ending, that's the real tough thing. And it was a typical example of where we as writers try to get the characters talk about everything again. Also the message of the movie, you know, like what they experienced. And it's something that you say, like you write the movie basically 3 times: when you write it, when you shoot it, and when you edit it. And when shooting with these actors, we figured already like, oh, I think it's all there. They don't need to say it. And we had such brilliant actors where you were like, they had said it with much less lines. And then in the editing, we could even cut out more of these. And yeah, a good example of never try to force your message to the audience. They should feel it from the dialogue. And yeah, so I would mention this.
Peter?
There was a speech scene. If you haven't seen the film, after the explosion, there's an explosion in the Vatican. The second explosion in the Vatican, the big one. And the horrible right-wing Cardinal Tedesco uses this as an excuse to go on a sort of Islamophobic rant. And then this relatively unknown Cardinal Benitez stands up and gives a speech. And if you ever find yourself considering giving a character a speech of about 10 lines that's then supposed to change the entire plot and the hearts and minds of every character, just don't do it. It's just... I had about 20 drafts of that bloody speech, and you know, and it was just, there were all variations on why can't we all just get along and love each other. And so, and actually what made it, and so we kept on working it and trying to make it slightly less sickening. But what actually really helped in the end was we said to Carlos, who played Benitez, who's Mexican, to do it in Spanish. And somehow it just helped so much. It just stopped feeling so corny. It felt slightly more, it felt more truthful, and it just flowed. So it was a really interesting lesson.
So the next question is, what are you doing next? I gave away some of it, but Peter, you start.
Oh, well, the thing I'm writing at the moment, I'm not really allowed to talk about, which makes it sound more exciting than it actually is. But then I'm gonna do well, a few things, but one of them is the director Thomas Vinterberg. I'm going to do a film with Thomas.
Excellent.
Is that Woody Allen script still available that you wrote? Like,
Yeah. We're looking for a European director to do this Woody Allen project.
No, actually, I don't know. Like, I admire you. You told me yesterday that you're shooting like 2 or 3 months again. I'm like, I admire that highly. I couldn't do that. We start to talk again, but I don't know. It was quite overwhelming, the whole process or the whole journey with that movie. I thought during that touring I could start to think about that, but you might know it. It's like it wasn't possible. So I don't know yet. But I like to work on something historical. I have to say I really enjoyed the research process a lot. So I think, and I liked much working with this guy. And so these are things that are clear.
Simona, you've already finished. You're like finishing a movie. You already shot another movie.
I am, yeah. I shot a film this summer and a bit into the fall. It's called Ann Lee, and it's inspired by the life of Ann Lee, who's the founders of the Shakers. And it's a musical that Brady and I wrote. No, it's not a joke. We really did. So we were working again with Daniel Blumberg, who did the score for The Brutalist and who did the score for my last film, and we've. The Shakers worship through song and dance. So it's a musical, but it's also inspired and based on old Shaker hymns.
I like that response. Jesse, you clearly have something coming up.
Yeah. We start in 6 weeks, actually. Yeah, it's also a musical.
It's true.
Yeah. So it's so the movie is about this very shy, like, pathologically shy woman who Julianne Moore plays, who joins on a lark this local community theater that Paul Giamatti runs like a cult, and she's like charismatic, but like he pushes her, and she kind of goes method, and she finds her voice through this very silly musical.
What's it called?
Untitled Jesse Eisenberg. I wish we can use a different person's name, but for like contractual reasons, it has to be untitled my name, and because we can't agree on a title. I mean, like internally, when people are like, I don't really like the title, yeah, I'll come up with the name prior to the release.
And you've got Train Dreams.
Yes, I just finished a film called Train Dreams that's based on this beautiful novella by Dennis Johnson, an amazing American writer. And yeah, he's incredible. There's Dennis's mom over there. Yeah, stars Joel Edgerton and Felicity Jones, and so it just from going to Sing Sing to finishing that, and we just premiered at Sundance, and it's going to come out in the fall. I'm just going to hang out with my wife and my kid for a bit, like try and see them again. That's what's next for me.
Understandable.
Yeah, my next writing project, I'm doing an adaptation with the Moroccan Iraqi director Talah Hadid, who's the niece of the architect Zaha Hadid. Very interesting emerging filmmaker. We're doing an adaptation of Abdelrahman Munif's novel Cities of Salt, which is about the first encounter of the Bedouin with the American geologists looking for oil.
Ooh. So what period is that?
It's in the late 30s, early 40s, and yeah, it's the sort of the start of the Petrocene.
So we're almost done, but we have a little bit of time left. So I'm going to ask the question: what is the fate of the 2-hour movie? Anyone can answer this. Is it alive? Is it going to continue? Are we going to be able to continue to have them? It feels endangered to me. Maybe you will disagree with me.
Wait, can I quote you?
Yeah, please do. I was hoping you would.
We're back. So this was brilliant. We're backstage talking about Mona's movie. It's very long, obviously, and brilliant, and I could have watched it longer. So but you're saying like. People say all the time, you got to watch this series, but just watch the first 4 episodes before you get into it. But then the 3-hour movie comes out, and they're like, it's a 3-hour movie. So what the,
Yeah.
Maybe there's a future for the 3-hour movie and not the 2-hour movie.
That's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I keep telling people, just pretend like you're binging the movie.
Right.
Peter?
I mean, I honestly don't know. I worry about cinema. I worry. It's been such an important thing for me, to be in the cinema, to be in where you are watching a film. I'm really frightened that it's going to go. I hope not.
I'm a bit more optimistic. I don't know. I think like I'm very worried about our industry and the theatrical experience that our industry doesn't seem to be able to figure out how to give people it in a way that I don't know. It feels like the problem is more on the distribution side and how much they're charging for tickets and things like that. I think I'm very inspired by just all the ways we can watch things and how people. There's something about. I'm very rambling through this, but and I'm sorry, but like I find with friends who are not in the industry at all are coming to me and being like, hey, have you ever heard of this director Abbas Kiarostami? Because that's accessible to people now in a way that when I was a kid, I never saw a Iranian movie or a television show from South Korea or anything like that. And I actually think that it's a really exciting time. There's a real desire there from people for movies. And there's something about the hour and a half, 2 hours that like, I don't know what it is. It feels, there's obviously amazing films that are much longer and amazing films that are much shorter, but there's something about that that's almost like maybe a bit ingrained in us. I don't know, in a strange way. Just there's something natural about it. Like even if you're a writer who writes something on a computer from 1987 on an email, it's still kind of like, if that's how you write, it still kind of naturally goes there. And some stories need something different, but I don't know. I'm very optimistic about it.
I think, I mean, just seeing you all here makes me happy because I feel like it's so important for us to physically come together, to see each other. I feel like we have to find each other. And yeah, there's a real danger in not seeing that there's enough of us to actually change things and to come together to experience also, and John Berger said this far better than I can years ago, but that events always happen and how they cohere is what we agree on as reality. And if we can't come together and actually experience that together, then what we can agree on is tragic, or what we can agree on as criminal, or what we can agree on as worth, funny. These things become super important in terms of like how our society is fragmented or how it comes together. And, it's often been said that societies and cultures are remembered for two things: their brutality or their art. And that's really true. Think about it. It's really true. And so I think cinema is such an important aspect of the, global art. And I think streaming has, if nothing else, gotten us over our particular American fear of subtitles or resistance to subtitles. And I agree, it's great to know that the entire history of cinema is available somewhere online. It's helpful, it's also hard, but the corporate consolidation is a problem, and especially when the corporate consolidators are kissing a certain ring. So I think we just have to keep fighting back.
Thank you all. Thank you for doing this. You were great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Everybody.